She's laughing. Lewis must be, yeah. That's awesome. As usual, if anybody wants to talk, raise the blue hand.
Hey, Matt, I've got an orange button on my screen telling me that we're in practice only mode and that I have to broadcast it. Do you want me to hit that?
Mine says live.
Mine says live on YouTube, yes.
We don't have any attendees, and I'm wondering if I have that control for some reason.
No, you shouldn't. We should be live. We are live right now.
Matt,
Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the May meeting of the Council Rock Board of School Directors. It's hard to believe that we're even in this situation with continued virtual meetings, but it's really hard to believe that we're going into Memorial Day weekend already. Time surely flies. So hopefully everybody is getting along okay out there. We certainly appreciate the patience of all our families and certainly the dedication and the work of all our staff. So if I could please ask Ms. Brooks to lead us tonight in the Pledge of Allegiance, that'd be great.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ms. Brooks. Madam Secretary, if I could have a roll call, please.
Yep. Denise Brooks,
Here.
Marianne McKee,
Here.
Joe Hidalgo,
Here.
Kristen Marcel,
Here.
Ed Solomon,
Here.
Andy Block,
Here.
Mark Freilich,
Here.
Ed Tate,
Here.
Mike Thorwart.
Here.
Thank you. Dr. Frazier, Superintendent's report, please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Block, and good evening to everyone. Certainly hope that all of you and all of your loved ones continue to stay healthy and well these very trying times. Tonight we have a pretty significant agenda in front of us, and certainly we thank you for tuning in. It's been pretty well documented up to this point that we are, as a school district, facing a pretty severe budget deficit for the upcoming 2021 school year and quite probably in subsequent school years as well. We've already taken several steps to work towards closing this gap. We've suspended, as many of you know, our capital plan, and we have also identified over $3 million worth of cuts or reductions at this point. And this evening's board meeting brings a critically important element to further reduce the deficit that we face. This afternoon, the Council Rock Education Association, CREA, which includes our teachers and our other educational professionals, approved an agreement to make substantial salary concessions over the next 18 months. This CREA vote today follows an approved agreement by the Council Rock Administrators Association earlier this week that likewise calls for significant salary concessions. These concessions, if approved by the board this evening, will result in a total cumulative savings of approximately $4.6 million over this 18-month period, and that breaks down to approximately $2.5 million in the 2021 school year and another $2.1 million estimated in the 21-22 school year. And this wasn't really picked up by the press, but deserves mention without a doubt, and that is that CRESPA, our Council Rock Educational Support Professionals Association, had likewise previously agreed to salary concessions in the 2021 school year as part of their current contract. I would tell you that as superintendent and one of the people taking these concessions, I am exceptionally proud of, and I am exceptionally grateful for all of Team CR, our administrators, our teachers, our support staff. All of them have exemplified their devotion not only to the Council Rock School District, but much more meaningfully and powerfully, in my opinion, than that, it exemplifies their collective devotion to the students of our Council Rock community. So I know that I join many of you in our community in saying thank you to all of them. And as a bittersweet follow-up to that topic, also on the agenda this evening are the retirements of 36 members of Team CR. These 36 individuals have served the Council Rock School District for a collective 834 years. 834 years. They are true Council Rockers. They will always be true Council Rockers. And certainly we are going to miss them. And certainly we thank them. And Mr. Frederickson, let's proceed with the tape. So here they are. Okay, I did not want to interrupt in the middle of that. I could not really hear that. Am I the only one, or were others in the same boat?
No, I didn't hear much of that. Very low.
I didn't hear it.
Mr. Ferguson, is there any tricks up our sleeves to remedy that? We can always come back to it later if we want to.
I will continue to look, well, if you'd like to continue, but no, I'm not sure why it didn't happen.
Matt,
I got it.
Uh,
Would you like me to do it again?
If it's
there should
yeah,
be there
absolutely.
should be an allowance in the menu that allows. the
Yes, I just saw it.
webinar. You saw that? Okay.
I think so. Just tell me, can you hear it now?
Yes.
Yes.
Brandy Ayers, 18 years. Tony Coletta, 25 years. Nancy Hermansky, 22 years. Leslie Landy, 12 years. Diane Lindemuth, 16 years. Terry Naprikowski, 30 years. Michelle Brodsky, 32 years. Nancy Kaplan, 22 years. Susan Finkboner, 20 years. Kathleen Garvey, 14 years. Lynn Hayden, 25 years. Sarah Huntington, 20 years. Steve Inlander, 26 years. Jerome O'Brien, 40 years. Ruth O'Brien, 37 years. Linda Pezzicara, 23 years. Susan Post, 33 years. Karen Smith, 21 years. Nancy Stout, 30 years. Martha Taylor, 22 years. Joy Vandervliet, 21 years. Lisa Van Eysden, 19 years. Elise Weinstein, 30 years. John Wright, 35 years. Kevin King, 21 years. Margaret Gerhardt, 18 years. Lou Groves, 32 years. Judith Kaufman, 29 years. Kathleen Labold, 24 years. Nanette Lutz, 20 years. Patricia Millen, 12 years. Timothy Rothrock, 21 years. Jill Sharp, 29 years. Arlene Spivak, 16 years. Maria Trudeau, 19 years.
much better with sound. I do believe.
Dr. Frazier, can I make a quick comment? Do you mind?
Yeah, please do.
Normally at this point, the board expresses its appreciation to all our retirees for their years of service. So on behalf of all of us, a heartfelt thank you. This isn't the way we expected to hold this ceremony, but nonetheless, the sentiment is the same, and it's real. We'd also normally be providing bells, and hopefully that bell will find you in the not too distant future as a recognition of your incredible years of service.
Indeed, a bell for everyone. Small token of our appreciation. So thank you, Mr. Block, and really on behalf of the entire Council Rock School District and Council Rock community. 36 wonderful individuals. We are equally sad for us and happy for you. And as I said, you give this much time and attention and devotion to the Council Rock School District. You are a Council Rocker for life. So this should always be viewed as home for you. So congratulations to our class of 2020 retirees. And speaking of the class of 2020, personalized lawn signs were delivered today to our high school seniors. These signs were delivered by about 200 volunteers between both high schools, a combination of administrators, teachers, support staff, and members of CREF, the Council Rock Education Foundation. And I want to thank CREF and thank their executive director, Gail Acosta, for your partnership in celebrating the class of 2020. It's really been fantastic. And to our soon-to-be alumni, we look forward to having you walk the stage one day soon, as we will then incorporate that footage into our ceremony. I know that you are looking forward to that moment, and we're looking forward to it for you. And we're also looking forward to the senior car parade through your high school campus one last time on the old stomping grounds, and that'll take place on the morning of graduation day on Monday, June 15th. And lastly, I want to remind all students and all parents that the last day of new learning for seniors will be Friday, June 5th, and the last day of new learning for K-11 students will be Tuesday, June 9th. Our teachers, I'd written this the other day, will be available off and on over that final week of school as they do need time to tend to their classrooms, both physically and virtually, to close out the classrooms before summer hits. And certainly to all students and to all parents and all of our educators, we continue to appreciate and value everyone's patience and grace as we continue with this distance learning program. I know, we all know that this has not been easy on anyone. So thank you. And thank you, Mr. Block.
Thank you, Dr. Frazier. Mr. Cox, solicitor's report, please.
Mr. Block, the board has not held an executive session since the special meeting on May 7th on the proposed budget. And I do not have anything to add to my solicitor's report that I circulated to the board earlier in the week. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Mr. Cox. With that, we'll move to public comment. Ms. O'Grady, what have we got?
We have one public comment that was submitted by Jennifer Daniels of Wrightstown. Ms. Daniels wrote, "I want to express my appreciation for today's efforts by dedicated CRSD faculty and staff to deliver signs to our seniors. In many ways, this simple act of giving could not have been more symbolic, as it occurred on the same day that our CREA and CRESPA members were voting to help with the budgetary problems brought on by the COVID pandemic that our community is facing. These acts of giving mean so much, and I'm grateful to be part of a community where everyone pulls together in times of need." And that was the only public comment submitted.
Thank you, Ms. O'Grady. So now we'll move on to letter G. Mr. Cox, help me with this. This is the appointment of voting delegates for the PSBA Delegate Assembly that takes place in the fall. It's just simply like any other appointment, right?
That's correct, Mr. Block.
Okay. What I'll do is we'll, the secretary is eligible for this, which we've done to pass. I'll appoint Kapua. Ms. Brooks is our legislative affairs person, if that's okay. And then I was going to appoint myself unless there's somebody else who wants to volunteer. Don't see any blue hands, so I will go ahead and appoint myself. And with that, Ms. Marcel, if you could please provide the motions for both the minutes of the board meeting of April 23rd and May 7th.
Move to approve the minutes of the public meeting of the Board of School Directors on April 23rd, 2020, and the special meeting on May 7th, 2020.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any questions? Any objections? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay.
Aye.
Let the secretary please record show the motion passes 9-0. With that, we'll move to our discussion items. We've got two listed in the agenda. We're actually going to pull two items out of the agenda to include in this section. We'll start with the draft of the 2020-21 board meeting schedule. Dr. Frazier, do you want to speak to that?
I'll be happy to. Board members, you have a copy of this in the board agenda, and if anyone at home is on board docs with our board agenda, you have this draft calendar in there as well as a public attachment. So to the board, this looks a lot like it's looked in the past with one board business meeting a month. The difference with this potential calendar, it's only a draft, we can keep it as is or make any changes that collectively we want to make, is that we've historically had our board business meeting like this one, the third Thursday of the month. And in thinking this through and talking it through as a cabinet team, we thought that there could be some logic in taking that board business meeting to the first Thursday of each month because it does a couple of things. One is the previous month's committee meetings lead up then to that to the formal approvals or action otherwise at the board meeting. And then a little bit more practically even than that is at the beginning of December, the first week of December, we need annually to hold a reorganization meeting. So we typically do that as a special meeting with a committee meeting tacked on to the beginning or the end of it. So should we have the board business meeting as the first Monday of that month, we would be able to do that reorganization process as part of then running into a business meeting. And then there's also a value add, I think, in the month of June. So that value add is a little bit different. That is more around budget process. And as our community knows, and I will give as a reminder, all new student registrations to be guaranteed a spot at the homeschool need to be in by June 1st. And that's a consistent date each year. So whenever we pass the budget the third week of May, as we have often in the past, we don't know that exact number of classroom teacher needs at the elementary level by going to the first Thursday in June. In this case, it would be June 3rd. We would have the benefit of knowing exactly how many elementary sections we'll have and thus elementary teachers will need. Otherwise, it's pretty status quo. Policy on a quarterly basis, policy still on a Monday, typically the first Monday of the month. The exception there would be September, and that's because of the Labor Day holiday on September 7th. So with that, open to any and all feedback. And again, this is fine, certainly administratively as is, but we're also happy to make any changes that would best accommodate the board.
Thanks, Dr. Frazier. I'll remind the board, if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment, just please raise your hand in the chat box and I'll recognize you. Is this something that we have to vote, Dr. Frazier, or that you're just looking for feedback and then we can put it into play if there's no objection?
Yeah, historically, we've just done this as feedback and then put it in motion. It's only served as a discussion item in the past.
Okay. I do not see anyone wishing to comment or ask a question. So it looks like we've got a new schedule starting in the new school year.
All right, sounds good.
All right.
Put it in motion, advertise accordingly.
All right, so we're going to pull letter L in the finance section up. It's our personnel actions. Mr. Bialik, could you please read that motion and could I please get a second from someone?
The answer's yes. The answer is yes. I just needed to find my button there. My apologies. So I move to approve the personnel actions as contained in the attachment to this agenda.
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Thorwart. Dr. Frazier, I think you have a few words you want to say before any discussion.
No, if it's okay, I'll wait until after action's taken.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Does what I'll do is here, I'd like to take a roll call vote, please, Madam Secretary.
Right, I'm on now.
Yep. We got you.
Okay. Ed Tate,
Yes.
Mike Thorwart,
Yes.
Denise Brooks,
Yes.
Marion McKee,
Yes.
Joe Hidalgo,
Yes.
Kristen Marcel,
Yes.
Ed Solomon,
Yes.
Andy Block,
Yes.
Mark Vilac.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 9-0. Now, Dr. Frazier, I'm sure you'd like to say something.
I certainly would. Thanks so much, Mr. Block. A couple notes here. In addition to all the retirees that we noted earlier, one of those retirees is Mr. Kevin King, as he was profiled in that slideshow there. Mr. King is principal of Newtown Elementary School, has been for the past 14 years, a total of 21 years in Council Rock School District, and was at Wrightstown Elementary prior to these past 14 years as Newtown Elementary. So first and foremost, we wish Mr. King, along with all of our retirees, congratulations and nothing but the best as he moves on to new opportunities and new chapters in his life. And then in the corresponding move this evening, we are very pleased to announce that Mr. Robert Francis, who's on the call with us this evening, Bob Francis, congratulations to you. Mr. Francis was just approved as the new principal of Newtown Elementary School. And Mr. Francis has been with the Council Rock School District for 15 years now, both as a classroom teacher and as a gifted education teacher. He has served on numerous committees throughout the years and really gained some fantastic leadership experience and did fantastic work as a leader the past 3 summers running our summer academic programs and STEM programs. So Mr. Francis, I see you here on the Zoom call with us, and we know that you know how to use Zoom because you spent enough hours with us interviewing here the past few weeks. So congratulations to you, and I will turn it over to you to say a few words.
Thank you, Dr. Frazier. First, I want to thank the members of the school board, the entire Council Rock administrative team, and the interview team as well for giving me this great opportunity, for having the confidence in me and selecting me to be the next principal of Newtown Elementary. I also want to thank my family, my wife and kids especially, who have been very supportive through difficult times with being stay at home. So I'm very excited for the opportunity. I'm grateful for the chance to serve the students and families in the community. And I'm very, very excited to join the Newtown team. I'm also very humbled and honored to be taking over for Kevin King, who has been a pillar in the Council Rock community for many years now. I'd like to wish him the best in his upcoming retirement. And I look forward to working with him in the coming weeks so that we can transition and get ready for the next school year. So thank you very much.
Fantastic, Mr. Francis. Congratulations again.
Thank you.
And the community should know this too, that we had a total of 49 applicants for this position and a number of very, very highly qualified, tenured folks wanted this position. And Mr. Francis certainly had stiff competition, and yet he rose to the top through what can probably only be described as a pretty rigorous interview process. So congratulations, Mr. Francis. I'm happy for you. I am happy for Newtown Elementary School students, parents, and staff as well.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to join the team.
Okay. Well, normally now, Mr. Francis, you'd be getting a standing ovation. So I'd ask my peers to turn off their mute buttons. I'm not sure what it's going to sound like, but
thank you very much.
All right. And with that, we're going to move 3 other items up to the front of the agenda. I have a quick question first for Mr. Cox. Can I take these 3 concession motions together, or do they need to be separate?
Mr. Block, where are you looking on that?
I'm going to be taking in the finance section I, J, and K and asking Dr. Thorwart to move those now. So my question is, can we do those 3 together? It's for the amendments, the employment agreements, and the other agreements.
Bear with me 1 second. I'm switching back and forth. Yes, Mr. Block, they can be taken together.
Okay, are there any board members who have any objection to that? Okay, great. Dr. Thorward, if you could take I, J, and K
Sure.
together, please, and if I can get a second.
Sure. I move to approve the amendments to the employment agreements of Dr. Robert Frazier, Dr. Susan Elliott, Mr. William Stone, and Miss Christine Taylor as attached to the agenda. I further move to approve the amendment to the agreement between the Council Rock School District and the Council Rock Administrators Act 93 agreement as attached. And lastly, to approve the extension of the agreement between the Council Rock School District and the Council Rock Education Association, CREA, as attached to this agenda.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. McKee. Does anybody have any questions, or if you'd like to make a comment, please raise your hand in the comments box. Mary Ann McKee.
Thanks very much. I just wanted to take the opportunity to add my thanks to CREA and CRAA for taking this action. Again, it speaks to their commitment to education, to children, to the community at large. And I just want them to know that it's really sincerely appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McKee. Dr. Thorward?
Yeah, I'll, excuse me, just want to add to Mary Ann there and just say thank you. It is appreciated, and these are tough times.
Any other board members with comment? Mr. Bialik?
Yeah, so I have a question here. Dr. Frazier, regarding these contract agreements, and I, of course, appreciate our staff and our employees agreeing to these concessions. My concern is that it may not be enough, and we still may have some significant issues ahead of us. So if we need to, if this time next year, if we're looking at the situation that Mr. Stone projected, and we're looking in 2023 where we're running negative, which is something that we cannot do. We've exhausted all of our reserve funds, and we still have a negative projection. And we see that heading here. This time next year, can we go back and renegotiate these contracts again?
Well, you're asking me if we can, and yes, we can. Now, you're asking me if we can do so a year from now. Recall that these particular concessions are over an 18-month period. And that's, that was done intentionally, recognizing that this isn't just a one-year budget deficit, but we know that if anything, 21-22 is going to be worse, and could certainly continue beyond that. What I would say is that really for the majority of these contracts that we're talking about, they'll actually expire before we would get into that 2022-23 timeframe. So there will be an opportunity for both sides, whether it's the administrative group, support group, teacher group, some of us individually. There will be an opportunity naturally just through the life cycle of the contract for those to come up once again.
And I know we've talked about this, but is there any thought among particularly the CREA group, that somehow this is going to avoid any kind of furloughs at all?
Well, yeah, no, sure. It's a great question. And Mr. Deal, I want to give Dave Deal, president of CREA, a ton of credit for his leadership and his just willingness to talk and work together throughout all of this. And Mr. Deal asked me that question on day one, and he certainly is very mindful of that. And what I've said to Mr. Deal is, look, I'm pretty sure that with these concessions, with administrative concessions, with reductions that we're making, obviously a big question is coming up on the revenue side in terms of a tax increase. So when you put that whole puzzle together, I am reasonably optimistic that we will not need to furlough anyone. And certainly my plan as we sit here on the evening of Thursday, May 21st, is not to furlough anyone.
Okay, so I'll just say for me, I'm not going to, I could separate these out, but I'm just going to vote no as an entire block on this. Because for me, my concern is that while I greatly appreciate the concessions and the immediacy of the timing for the organizations to come together with the administration, all the hard work that was done in these discussions from the administration and the unions themselves, I'm just afraid that it's not going to be enough and that there may be a false sense of security within the employees. Now, again, I hope I'm completely wrong with our projections, but just for me, I'm not comfortable with that. So I'll be voting no. But this has nothing to do with any of the members of the organizations. I appreciate what they've done. I'm just not sure if it's fair on either side.
Thank you, Mr. Bialik. Mr. Hidalgo?
Yeah, thank you. I could really this is a hard one because, we really do appreciate the offer that's been put on the table here for us and the sacrifices and concessions that are being made. And we truly, truly believe in a team effort here. And it's obvious that we have great staff that are willing to make these concessions. Then you have to listen to your gut and where we come from. And, I tend to align myself in the same category as Mark and being very weary of where we are and the future. And when I came on board, I really thought that we were already getting ahead of ourselves from a compensation standpoint that we can't keep up with, even with the Act 1 indexes. Can we keep up with the amount of money we spend on contracts? And it's a shame, but we kind of are at this nexus and fork in the road. So I do believe that these are real savings, and I'm very appreciative, and I want to continue to work with the teachers and the other administrators and other groups to try to see what we can do in the future. And hopefully, that's great to hear that there's no furloughs or furlough planned in the future. I just can't see how that's possible, depending on how the taxes come in next year. It's going to be a big question mark. So I'm very thankful for the concessions on the table today, and I very much appreciate it, but I'm going to stick with Mark Bialik on this one because I think he and I have the same ideas on or the worries and concerns. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hidalgo. Are there other comments?
One thing I would just say, this is Rob Cox, is that neither the addendum to the Act 93 agreement, and although I did not prepare the addendum to the CREA agreement, competent counsel from Fox Rothschild did so, neither of them waive the district's rights to exercise the furlough rights under the school code. So that would remain an option for the district, these addenda notwithstanding. I wanted to mention that just so the board's advised.
Thank you, Mr. Cox. Ms. Marcel?
Thank you, Mr. Block. I was just going to mention that, as we just heard from Mr. Cox in terms of being able to make decisions later, obviously we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know what's going to happen. But from my perspective, I think that this concession is really quite amazing to think about with all of the things that are going on right now, to see something like this come together and how the community is trying to pull together to get through this. And obviously we have a rough financial road ahead, but I really appreciate these efforts, and I will be supporting it tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Marcel. Mr. Bialik's got another comment.
Yeah, I just need a clarification on what Mr. Cox said. So I think what you said was in reference to the item I and item J amendments, it doesn't restrict any furloughs. Are you saying that item K, the CREA agreement, would restrict furloughs?
No, Mr. Bialik, I was referring to both the CREA addendum and the Act 93 addendum.
Okay, my apologies.
In other words, those addenda do not waive the district's rights under the school code.
Understood. Thank you.
With respect to furlough.
Understood. Thank you.
Ms. Marcel, did you have anything else? Your hand is still up? No. Okay. Ms. Brooks?
Yeah. Announced on Tuesday, and on Tuesday night I was at the IU meeting, and I got a lot of questions from districts around the county on this topic. And overall, the impression was that they were so impressed with the great relationship that we have with our teaching staff, and were so impressed with the collaborative nature that inspires this. So I just wanted to say that it is not unnoticed outside of our own community, and I have just incredible gratitude for responding to this difficult time. So thank you.
Mr. Bialik, your hand's still up. Did you have anything further?
No, I don't. My apologies.
No worries. Mr. Tate?
Thank you, Mr. Block. I think the concessions by CREA, our administrators, and CRESPA really are admirable and are to be appreciated. I'm glad Mr. Cox chimed in with a comment about the fact that these agreements do not preclude future furloughs, which all of us would do everything possible to avoid, I'm sure. But these agreements don't preclude furloughs, but they will go a long way to helping us address our budgetary crisis. So I'm very appreciative of the efforts of everyone involved in bringing these concessions to the table tonight. And I'm very supportive. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tate. Are there any other comments from the board? Okay, being that I just had a couple things that I wanted to share. We have had a long history of collaboration, which has provided us with labor peace for a long time, which is great for our kids and great for the district. On Tuesdays, they hold a school board leadership call across the state of Pennsylvania. And certainly one of the topics that we talk about is the looming financial crisis that's out there. And similar to what Denise said, we are one of the few in the state, at least of those who spoke, that have the kind of relationship that can promote these kinds of savings in times like this. There's a lot of unknown, and we've talked about not knowing what our tax revenue is going to be next year. We also don't know what our state funding could look like, and we know that states around the country are going to be in trouble based on what they likely won't get from the government. So for me, what this really provides is more of a known. So it helps us understand what the next 2 years can look like from the single biggest piece of our appropriations base. And while that doesn't make it a whole lot easier to plan for where we're going to be, it does make it easier. So I want to thank the cabinet and the entire group of administrators for their concession, especially given they just signed on for a new contract. So for them, it's significant, and we appreciate that. And then also thanks to Mr. Deal and the entire crew. This is significant. It's meaningful. It's consistent with past practice. And hey, if it continues to get worse, we have an open line of communication, and I'm sure we'll all pitch in and do what we got to do, for the sustainability of the district. So from that perspective, to all who are doing their part of many parts that are happening, thank you. And with that, I'll ask for a roll call vote, please, Madam Secretary.
Okay. All right. Joe Hidalgo. Joe Hidalgo.
Sorry. No.
Kristen Marcel.
Yes.
Ed Solomon.
Yes.
Andy Block.
Yes.
Mark Bialik.
No.
Ed Tate.
Yes.
Mike Thorwart.
Yes.
Denise Brooks.
Yes.
Marion McKee.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion passes 7-2. So congratulations and thank you to everyone. And with that, now we'll start talking about the rest of our financial position as we get into a presentation on the 2020-21 budget. Is Mr. Stone going to take us through this, or is the finance chairs going to help as well?
I believe Mr. Stone will have the floor.
I will. Thank you, Dr. Frazier. And just give me one moment. I will share my screen here. Okay, I presume you have me.
Yes.
All right, very good. So this evening, I'm going to present just a very brief update on the budget process here in Council Rock, and there's been lots of discussion about what we are facing in terms of the economic reality of our situation. So we've started out the budget process under pretty normal circumstances, but then very quickly, as the pandemic became a reality here in the United States and Pennsylvania, our budget deficit grew to as large as $16.1 million. And that's primarily a result of the swift and pronounced entry into the recession that we saw as a result of the pandemic. Council Rock relies heavily on local revenue. It accounts for about 77% of our total revenue, which is approximately $245 million. And we're certainly expecting to see some declines in that revenue. First of all, and perhaps most importantly, the earned income tax filing deadline was delayed until July 15th, which, as most folks know, that pushes us into a new fiscal year, which means that a significant portion of our revenue, about 20% of that line item, which equates to about $5 million, was pushed into the next fiscal year. And that further makes difficult the ability to project the impact of unemployment and the economic slowdown in our revenue, because we're not seeing a very significant portion of that revenue come through as anticipated. So we will not have the ability to really understand the general economic consequences of the recession until at least the end of August, when those final returns are ultimately filed and we see the collections that come through on that front. Most folks are also very aware that the interest rates as established by the Fed are basically at zero at this point, which the school district, because of restrictions on what we can invest in, our interest rates are anticipated to decline. So we went from budgeting and receiving almost $2 million of interest earnings on the funds that we hold in our accounts during the normal course of business to down to about $350,000, and did so in the course of just several weeks. And we're also seeing a general slowdown in the real estate market. So we collect a real estate transfer tax on the sale of properties. We collect interim real estate taxes on the when a new home is constructed or when a home is significantly reassessed. And those general slowdowns are significantly impacting our revenues. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that obviously we are in a very different educational environment. And so our expenditures are also decreasing, but the best case scenario that I can project based on what I am seeing right now is that our savings from being closed and not spending funds on transportation costs and saving money on utilities and certain other building related expenses will simply offset the revenue declines that we're seeing this year. As we look forward into the upcoming year, prudence calls for us to budget assuming a full return to schooling and a normal expenditure amount. But those revenue line items are not going to return to normal that quickly. So we'll obviously have a lot of uncertainty as we enter into the process. To date, the administrative team has produced budget reductions of $7.1 million. And those are the result of the professional staff retirements. There is a natural savings as a result of an employee who has served the district for many years and is at the top of the salary schedule, being traditionally replaced by an individual who is at the lower end of the salary schedule. And that savings is factored in at about $1.7 million. Dr. Frazier mentioned the employee concessions that were just approved, plus we had several salary corrections that need to be made as a result of just the normal process of reviewing the budget. Those net out to about $2 million of reductions. And then we have made reductions to our 300 to 900 objects, which are the services, supplies, and equipment necessary to operate our buildings and our programs, those came in at about $3.4 million. So of that $16 million deficit, $7.1 million has been reduced thanks in large part to the actions taken by the board just a few moments ago. The other assumption factored into the budget as we stand today is a real estate tax increase equal to 3.1% over the prior year rate. And that totals about $4.9 million. It's comprised of two items, the Act 1 index, which is the state mandated maximum allowable real estate tax increase of 2.6%. But the district is eligible this year for a special education exception because of increasing costs in special ed of another 0.5%, which equals out to the 3.1%. And so that totals $4.9 million, which if approved at the full amount would also offset that budget deficit. So this is an update to a slide that has been shown over the last couple of finance committee meetings, noting the changes in our revenue budget and our expenditure budget as we've gone through the budget development process. You can see on the left-hand side, the local revenue changes as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. You can also then see towards the bottom of this page, the updates as a result of the employee concessions. These are the primary changes to highlight this evening. There are costs for the employee concessions that are going down. And as a result, our reimbursements from the state will also go down. So those are reducing our revenue, but the expenditures, obviously, just to the right of those, are more significant than the revenue reductions. So we are at this juncture in the budget process anticipating revenues of $241.7 million, expenditures of $245.9 million. You can see the information on the retirees that I mentioned, the department reductions, which on average are about 15% of each individual department member's budget, and then the employee concessions factored right here. So that leaves us with a remaining budget deficit as of today of approximately $4.1 million. I'd like to point out that in addition to the typical actions for approving the final budget happening in June, we've now added a new budget forum on Wednesday, June 3rd, where we will answer questions posed by the school board members. We will review additional reductions that are proposed to help reduce that $4.1 million budget deficit. And we will also be demonstrating the impact of a no deficit budget model, which would fully eliminate that $4.1 million. We will be demonstrating what programs or services would need to be reduced in order to achieve that goal, which in the long-term planning of the district's finances makes great sense as far as ensuring that revenues and expenditures are equal over the long term of our finances. So we've spent a lot of time in the last several months talking about the impact of COVID-19, and I would like to draw the community's attention to two meetings in particular that they can view to get a much deeper understanding of the financial situation that we are in. This presentation will be posted to the website tomorrow, and these are active hyperlinks. Will take community members directly to those meetings. And you'll see here there's 150 minutes of discussion almost about the budget. The meeting in April talked more generally about the economic impacts of the coronavirus on our finances. And we also then in May went into the detailed review of budget reductions. You'll hear each cabinet member review the impact of those $3.4 million proposed to date to be reduced. But you'll also hear information about our long-term financial projections based on what we know about the COVID-19 pandemic and its impact in not just 2021, the upcoming budget year, but the years beyond. That concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. If any board members have questions or comments, I'd ask that you raise your hand and I'll.
Mr. Block, may I, before we jump in the board comment?
You may.
Mr. Stone, are you able to, looks like we just switched PowerPoint or just switched decks. Are we able to jump back in there and show the slide that sums it all up with the net deficit at the bottom?
Yes, I can. Just give me 1 second, please.
So by way of rationale for that request, I see that a number of our teachers and other staff are on this call as attendees, and that's very much appreciated. I just want to thank you again, whether you're a teacher, whether you're an administrator, whether you are a support staff member, because you all have chipped in, and the concessions that have just recently been made here, remember, are valued at $2.5 million. So we are looking here, and thanks to Mr. Stone for putting this back up. We have a remaining deficit of $4.1 million. Without these concessions, it doesn't take much to do the math. We would be there at $6.6 million. And mind you that this is assuming a full 3.1% tax increase. So I want to point that out, because I do know that we have a number of our staff members who are attending this evening and listening in live. So I just, again, wanted to express my thanks and my appreciation. And I know on behalf of really this school district as a whole, this board as a whole, and this community as a whole, because just that quickly we could have a differential there, jumping this number from 4.1 up to 6.6. And at that point, if I would be asked the question about furloughs, my answer, unfortunately, without these actions in terms of salary concessions, would need to be much different. But I am confident with these actions that have been taken that we will not need the furlough. I just wanted to restate that to make sure that my answer was clear. Thanks.
Any board comments or questions?
I'm trying to raise my hand, Andy.
All right, well, go ahead. Don't go
Okay.
for it.
So Bill, and I don't mean to put you on the spot. I'm sorry. I should have sent you an email, but do you have that spreadsheet that you shared with us last week at the last meeting that showed the projected year deficits?
It looks like this, right, Mark?
Yeah.
I do.
Looks like an L shape in the wrong way.
You'll just need to give me 1 moment to track it down. Pardon me.
And while you're pulling that up, I guess just to highlight the point, Dr. Frazier mentioned that this picture here, it's a $4.1 million deficit with a full tax increase and exceptions, which is about $5 million. So, should a board choose to not, raise that revenue, this becomes a $10 million deficit, which, is more than catastrophic.
Well, while Bill's pulling up that spreadsheet, I'll comment on that, Andy, while we're at it. And one of the reasons that I felt I couldn't support the concessions, the change to the contract, although, again, it may seem illogical. Listen, without this agreement, we have to pay this money. It's not like we have any other options. I think that there's a feeling potentially from certainly from the staff that, hey, we're doing our part, we're going to take these concessions, therefore the board should increase taxes to the maximum amount. And I don't know the answer to that. I don't know, sitting here today, if I can give a full tax increase or any tax increase to my neighbors, who so many of them have no income or reduced income. Very much the norm is a 20% income reduction, or a 50% income reduction, or a 100% income reduction. So that's very difficult to me. And the question I have that I want to talk about publicly here for a moment, when Bill gets the slide up, because I've been asked this question when I referenced the slide, is when we get to 2023 and we're in a deficit. So the chart on the right would be great, Bill. And I think does this chart already have the contract concessions in it, built into it?
It does not.
Okay, so the picture will look better after those, but it does assume full max tax increase, and it doesn't if I remember right from our meeting, it doesn't even have summer projects in there. Is that right?
You are correct.
Okay. So there's $3 million a year of maintenance that is not done in this situation, but we can't operate at a negative. We can't be in a position where we deplete our fund balance and in 2023 we have a negative $5.59 million. It's just not something a school district can do. So the question I'm asked all the time is, what do we do then? And I don't know the answer to that. So of course we're still going to have revenue coming in, and someone had said to me, well, it doesn't mean Council Rock doesn't have any money. And that's true. It means that we still have money. We just don't have enough to do everything we can or we need to do. And that's in this, in what Bill has in front of us, that's really the bare minimum, right? And please correct me if I'm wrong. So when we get to the point when we don't have the money to do what we need to do, what do we do? Is there an answer?
I'm sorry, Mr. I was not sure if that was a rhetorical question or.
No. It's an actual question. I mean, what do we do? What's our plan? What do we do? It's not a rhetorical question. It's a question that my monitor didn't freeze. Maybe you thought I froze. And I don't mean to put you on the hot seat. I'm just, and forgive me if it feels that way, but Dr. Frazier, Mr. Stone, how do we mitigate this? What are your thoughts? You've got to, this is keeping me up at night. It's got to be having some effect on everybody. So if you don't mind sharing your thoughts, I'd appreciate it.
So, I mean, let me start with what I know. I know that we are not permitted by Pennsylvania law to adopt a deficit budget, and that doesn't necessarily mean that your revenues have to equal your expenditures, but your revenues plus your fund balance, or your savings account must equal your expenditures. So as you see in 2023 projected, 24 projected, and 25 projected, that would not be a possibility. So there would have to be efforts on the revenue side to increase taxes as much as possible. We would have to also try to maximize any other funding sources that were available. But the more important work would likely have to be on the expenditure side. We would very likely need relief from mandates at the state level. This assumes continued increases in contributions to the PESER system, which is something out of the control of the district. We have federal and state mandates with regard to special education that are not funded, that we must keep up with. And we would have to look at lots of different options and likely have to think about what programs and services that we could continue to provide. We certainly would not be able to afford to do anything beyond the status quo. We would not be likely talking about new programs, new initiatives. We would very likely be talking about less over the next several years without some significant intervention.
Okay. So, again, just hearing that, I don't know how we get this information out to the community in a better way. I appreciate the email that was sent out. I think that Mr. Solomon and I was talking, he had a great idea that we should have this on the front page of our website, because this is not just a Council Rock problem. Of course, this is going to be in every school district problem, every municipality problem, every city problem, because unfortunately, municipalities, school districts, cities, and we've talked about it before, we're always looking to the optimistic scenario. We've ran budgets where we come in with a $6 or $4 or $10 million deficit, and we expect that somehow, we collectively expect that somehow we're going to close that budget. And we've been luckily able to do that in the past decade. And I don't know, when we talk about going back to the contract and when we talk about furloughs, when we get to 2023, I don't know how we're not talking about furloughs. Because we can trim around the edges with the budget But this projection is not assuming any new programs. It's not assuming Rock Block. It's not assuming turf. It's not assuming even those the projects of Finestone that we put aside. It is just our basic needs. So I don't know how we're not looking at furloughs. And by the way, I hope everything turns around wonderfully and this is not the situation. But I think we have to have realistic conversations about what this is going to look like and steps to make sure that this maintains a viable district.
Mr. Bollock, if I may, I'll say a couple things. One is my interpretation of your furlough question was in regards to the current budget that we're working on for the 2021 school year, and I do remain optimistic. I've said to Mr. Deal, I've said to others, I can't make any promises because obviously I am not in control of everything, but I am optimistic that we will not need to make any furloughs for the 2021 school year. In fact, I am optimistic that the 10th elementary counselor remains a top priority for me. So if anything, I hope that we are still able to fund that position because this isn't only a health crisis, physical health crisis that's going on, this pandemic. It's not only an economic crisis, but we all know that it's a mental health crisis as well. We've seen some very sobering and unfortunate stats, and we shouldn't be, any of us, and I'm not suggesting that anyone is, but we can't afford to be so naive to think that we are insulated from that within our 72 square miles. So when I answer that question, it's strictly for 2021 budget. I don't have the crystal ball to be able to make a statement like that one way or the other beyond that. The other piece that I would say is that I think we're already taking steps to address this. In fact, I think we're taking significant steps. The salary concessions from all three of our groups is a huge piece of this, but so is suspending the capital plan, and so are the $3.3 million of reductions that we presented as a cabinet team in the last joint committee meeting. So to put that in perspective, those $3.3 million of reductions, I mean, you saw the list of what they are and our anticipated impact of doing without those areas. But just to put it in numerical perspective, it's going to take us about $600,000 below what we have funded this year. So it's a true cut of $600,000, and that's before we look at any contracted increases or PSERS increase or first student increase, Chartwell's increase. We're bringing on a new custodial provider that is going to add to our budget by a couple $100,000 a year. So that it's not really a $600,000 cut there. It's really more like $1 million or maybe even more than $1 million when you factor in those other increases that are baked in to some of our contracts. So I feel like we have taken steps. Does it turn this projection on a dime? No, of course not. It's there's a lot more forces at play, and certainly we're not suggesting that what we've done so far is enough in the big picture. But I think that we have done a pretty good job, and I give Mr. Stone just a tremendous amount of credit for this, for controlling a lot of the variables that right now we can control. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Frazier. Dr. Thorward's got his hand up.
Yeah, I do. Couple of comments, and I'll dovetail into what Mark said in some regards. Frankly, Mark commented that he doesn't see new programs in 2021 or 21 or 22 or 23. I don't think we can afford new programs even now. I'll just throw that right out there. In your 300 to 900 reductions, in light of COVID and distance learning, it's unfortunate that about 25% of your reductions came out of technology. And I don't see that being sustainable moving forward with COVID and those sorts of things. And I know Dr. Frazier's interested in another counselor, but again, in light of COVID and distance learning and all the things we've had here, I got to be honest, counselors pale in comparison for me to the tech specialists that have kind of carried the water for our district here to keep teachers teaching in unique environment. So my support right now, if we're going to retain positions, will be those tech specialists. And lastly, and I don't need answers to any of these, I don't see any way you're going to shave another 4.1 million out of this year's budget unless we're going to pull it out of fund balance. And that's just my comment. So I'll leave it at that.
Mr. Bialik, you've got your hand up again?
I do, because I just wanted to respond to both Mr. Stone and Dr. Frazier. And if my comments sounded critical of any work that's been done prior to this, please don't take them that way, and I apologize. When I talk to people about our situation and our budget, I say that we've been doing this work for the past, I mean, certainly since I've been on the board, and certainly since Dr. Frazier's been sitting in that seat, to really go through and cut these budgets. And we've been working towards this zero deficit budget modeling that Bill talked about. And I'm if you can get excited about budgeting, I'm excited about that. So please in no way take my comments to be that you haven't done enough thus far. I think the efforts for this year from everybody across the board have been very, very good. I think the problem is just bigger, and I'd like to have that conversation. And we've talked about it already, and I'm sure we're going to talk about it more about what this looks like in the future and how to roll out these things so that, you know, we maintain some kind of, some kind of programs in Council Rock. I don't want to sound doom and gloom, but it's pretty gloomy. So please don't take my words to be critical of anything you've done thus far.
Any other comments from the board? Okay, good discussion, great presentation. To some of the points made, this clearly is something that the board and the team are taking very, very seriously. You know, we're looking at the glass, half full as we should, but there's a lot of work that's going into this. We're looking at all of the angles, and to kind of breathe a little bit of hope into it. I believe that with the way that we're approaching it, the fact that we do have a $22 million fund balance, and if we approach it prudently, we will get through. There's still a lot that we don't know, but we don't have a choice but to deal with it. And we've faced challenges in the past, maybe not exactly like this, but we will find a way to get through. And like any other company, business entity that has to do things differently, we will adapt and we will adjust. So we're good at it. So that being said, let's now move to the motion agenda section. Let's start with the Education Committee. Mr. Tate, please.
Thank you, Mr. Block. We last met on May 7 as part of the joint committee meeting, talked about, you probably recall, the virtual graduation plans for our high schools. And we also talked about textbook approvals, which are going to be reduced in scope. They've been already reduced, and they're probably, unfortunately, going to have to be reduced even further. That was May 7. The next joint committee meeting is June 11. We have one item on the agenda, and that is item A. I move to approve consent agenda item B as contained in the attachment to this agenda.
Second.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brooks. Are there any questions? Are there any objections? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any say nay? Motion passes. If we could get the motion, Ms. McKee, for letter C for the revised calendar school year.
Yes, Mr. Block. I move to approve the revised 2020-2021 school year calendar as contained in the attachment to this agenda.
Second.
I heard a second back there. Dr. Frazier or Mr. Sanko, do you want to make a quick comment here?
Yeah, certainly. So this is part of the contract extension with CREA, and as we had conversations around the concessions, one of the agreements that we quickly and easily came to was to take one day off of the teacher work year. So that actually has just been a very recent addition. It's typically been 189 days, and then we just added this extra day. I think last year might have been the first year, last year or 2 years ago. And so this is simply taking us back to those 189 days for the upcoming 2020-21 school year. And then once we produce our 21-22 school year, that likewise will have 189 teacher work days in it.
Thank you, Dr. Frazier. Any questions?
And Mr. Block, I'm sorry, let me be just a little bit more specific in terms of exactly what the change is. So the 1 day differential that we're talking about is we've sort of gotten into this routine here of having 4 opening in-service days the week before the first day of school. And historically that's been 3 days, Tuesday to Thursday. The past couple of years, it's been Monday to Thursday. Past 3 years, maybe it's been Monday to Thursday. So the only change that's happening here is that opening in service week for all 10-month staff, all of Team CR will be Tuesday to Thursday.
Thank you, Dr. Frazier. Are there any questions? Are there any objections? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any objections, say nay. Motion passes. With that, we'll move to Ms. Brooks. How about an IU update, please?
Thank you very much. The board of the IU met on Tuesday this week. Like every other school district, we talked about the budget. The IU budget, of course, is very unique. It's actually 32 individual budgets. The IU itself is not a taxing authority, so they get their revenues from state and federal and other sources. So it's totally different than what we go through. But their budget now is $179 million, which is up 1.73% versus last year. Our board looked at the portion of the Council Rock budget that contributes to this 2 months ago. We talked a little bit today. The United Way of Bucks County and the IU teamed up to move Bucks County's annual iSTEAM conference for students online. Traditionally, this event is held for 7th and 8th grade students at Delaware Valley University. And so this year, the event moved online. Normally, it's 800 students, and as of our board meeting Tuesday night, there were over 3,000 students registered. So it was great that that's the silver lining here, that more students could participate. So it was an event at 9:30 this morning, and it's been in the news. You may have seen it, that Miss America 2020, Camille Schreier, was one of the presenters. She's a Bucks County native, and she made history when she presented a chemistry demonstration as her talent at the Miss America competition. That was pretty cool. So we had a conversation about the Pennsylvania budget. There's still no formal word on what the 2020-21 budget will look like, but we know that there's a lot happening behind the scenes. Rumors in Harrisburg are circulating that there could potentially be 2 budgets because of declining revenue. An initial budget for 5 or 6 months, possibly from July 1st through December 31st. And then in November, with what would be a lame duck session, lame duck members of the assembly and currently elected members returning to pass a second budget for January through June. Part of the uncertainty with the budget just revolves around the declining revenues. Pennsylvania has collected 49.7% less money than they anticipated at this point. But that's deceiving because the extended deadlines for tax filing is a large contribution to that. And so overall for the year, the estimates are about 7.8 below expectations. House Bill 360 was introduced and signed into law by Governor Wilf earlier this month, and this law grants current school employees an extension until the end of the year, December 31st, to obtain renew federal criminal history clearances, which of course are required by state law. So hopefully that extension will help because many teachers have their clearances expiring. While neither the House or the Senate have taken up any bills recently to freeze property taxes, they did, however, move forward with legislation for senior citizens in a different way. And this is going to highlight something really unique thinking aligned with our SAGE program. House Bill 1076, which is they call STRIVE, stands for Senior Tax Reduction Incentive Volunteer Exchange Program. That's a mouthful. Authorizes school districts to establish a program that allows older residents to volunteer in the district in exchange for a property tax credit. So these types of services that a volunteer provides through the program have to enhance academic initiatives, and the district would have to establish guidelines, including the requirement for volunteers to undergo a criminal background check. So with SAGE in place, that it advances things. This has passed the House and the Senate and is sitting on the governor's desk. And I don't have all full information, but I wanted you to know that earlier this week, 357 school administrators from around the county met for a coronavirus work session. So they established work groups in 12 areas that included facilities, communications, human resources, business operations, nursing and student health, safety, curriculum and instruction, pupil services, online education, technology, athletics, and transportation. So 357 administrators divided into 12 groups, and each group, with all their different areas that they were exploring, imagined 3 ways for the school year to open. One was that the schools remained fully closed and needed to require full-time distance learning. The second was that the schools would open intermittently, either like staying over for a period of time until there's a spike in cases and then closing, or and transitioning mid-year to a new different program, or opening the schools with significant social distancing, including phased or reduced schedules. So the IU board, and I'm sure the superintendents, will be getting a full report on the results of this meeting. And when it comes in, I will be sure to share it with the board. Thank you.
And Mrs. Brooks, I'll just add to that. Thank you for mentioning those work sessions on Tuesday afternoon. We were very well represented in all of those groups. So time well spent, and very appreciative of our IU really throughout this entire process. Dr. Hoffman has been a fantastic leader. His entire team have also been fantastic leaders. So really, really nice to see the county come together.
Yeah, I can't emphasize that enough. I mean, the IU leadership has been great, but even within our IU board meetings, I mean, obviously the nature of some of the things we talk about are very different now and very timely. And just to be in a room with virtual room, with representatives of all the districts, as a school director, and to be able to participate in the conversations between the districts has been, very enlightening, very helpful. And by the way, makes me very, very proud of Council Rock.
Yeah, but if I could just make a comment, the whole notion of opening or closing the economy, unfortunately, has gotten political to some extent, depending on how you see it. And I'm not even going to go there. But what I do want to note, based on a lot of Ms. Brooks' comments and things Dr. Frazier has said, is that there is so much going on, so much advocacy, so much planning, so much contingency planning, so many what ifs, not only at the district level and the IU level, but at the state level, with all our, what we'll call the P organizations, lobbying to do things to leave control local as possible and to minimize impact of things outside of our control to us. So, even as board members, we see the same things coming out every day. It's easy to get really anxious when, you can't control some of it or you don't. But, what does give me a little bit of confidence is that, local people are focused on what we might have to deal with, and hopefully what we don't have to, in a forward-thinking way, trying to account for everything that they possibly can, that they might be able to control or not to control. So that would be something I'd put out there to folks who, aren't even, working within the school district or on the school board or things like that. So it's just good for, gives me comfort to know that work's going on. So thanks, Ms. Brooks, for that update. Mr. Hidalgo, if we can get a quick update on the Council Rock Education Foundation.
Okay, Mr. Block, I'll keep it short and sweet. The little blurb I have from Gail Costa was to come together and celebrate the Council Rock class of 2020. Now taking orders for Council Rock class of 2020 celebration signs. As many people will know today, the staff, as Mr. Frazier mentioned, Dr. Frazier, excuse me, we're delivering signs to all the seniors today, and I happened to witness one being delivered across the street to a family. They weren't home at the time, but they were quite surprised when they did come home to see a personalized sign with the picture, the name. They were appreciated. So I commend the foundation for finding a way to get together with the school district and help out. So these were provided at no cost to the families, and I thought that was important to mention. So as a part of a larger community-wide effort, the foundation is offering these signs in a generic form to help celebrate the class of 2020. So they can now be ordered online through the website for $10 for any person or business to proudly display. So show your support for the Council Rock seniors and go to the website and order today, please. That's about it for that. I did want to look into and get an update on the grants and the scholarships, but at this point, I don't have any information to give an update, but hopefully next meeting we'll have something. And
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hidalgo. And again, reminding folks to go out and get signs to celebrate our seniors. I ordered mine on Monday. With that, Ms. McKee, I understand you're giving the MBIT update this evening?
Yes, Mr. Block, thank you. MBIT Executive Council met on May 11th, where we continued to talk about the economic impact on MBIT's budget. Both Central Bucks and New Hope Silbury have already approved the budget that was previously presented, but in response to requests from council members, Mrs. Marcel and myself among them, further revisions have been made in an effort to reduce costs, and that most recent information has been shared with our board. We look forward to hearing back from you, your ideas on what's been presented there. And while budget is not necessarily happy news, I do have happy news to share from MBIT, and that is that 30 students from MBIT were inducted into the National Technical Honor Society on April 30th. And I'd like to recognize the following students from Council Rock South who achieved this honor. That would be Brian Adams, Milani McDonald, Ashley Petrella, Jennifer Slowicka, and from Council Rock North, Evan Woodhead and Zachary Gehring. So congratulations to these and all of the MBIT graduating seniors who will be recognized at a virtual ceremony on June the 4th. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Ms. McKee. I assume that there's no policy update?
No, sir.
All right, with that, we'll go to the Finance Committee update. Mr. Bialik, please.
Yeah, getting back in here. Okay, well, we held our Finance Committee meeting on May 7th as part of the joint committee meeting, and there are many things discussed, including a renewal of Chartwell's, and of course the budget. I'm going to let Mr. Stone just run through this at this point, and then Miss Marcel can add anything that she'd like.
Thank you, Mr. Bialik. Yes, we have our normal approvals for the month. We are asking for approval on 6 supply bids.
I'm sorry, Mr. Stone. Mark, could you make the motion for consent, please, first, and then we can get right into the discussion? Is that easier?
I move to, excuse me one second. I move to approve agenda items B through H as contained in the attachments to this agenda.
I'll second.
Thank you, Dr. Thorward. All right, Mr. Stone, sorry to interrupt you.
No problem. So we, as I was saying, we are approving 6 supply bids, which will set in motion the mechanisms to make financially responsible purchases for the upcoming school year. And we are also approving a 3-year agreement for elementary assignment books and secondary level planner books. And those items were discussed at the Finance Committee meeting. Item H is the approval of the Technology Pool Council Legal Services Consultation Agreement, which is a tremendous value to the district, where we, along with other school entities share in legal advice for a very, very modest fee, and get good guidance on very relevant topics and pertinent topics, which is very important in the world of virtual learning right now.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. Ms. Marcel, any comments before I open it up to the group? Does the group have any questions? The group have any objections? Oh, hang on, Mr. Salomon.
Yeah, just a quick question, Mr. Stone, the Chartwell's contract. I'm sure that was sent out, and obviously we're approving it now. Where in the contract do we have flexibility, or will we be talking to them when and if we ever go back to school about what could be a new cafeteria that we're not even used to at this point and is undefined?
There are two answers to that question, Mr. Salomon. The contract itself is a highly regulated PDE form document that provides very little opportunity for revision. So there is no mechanism in the contract for that type of discussion. However, our partnership with Chartwells extends beyond that contract, and we have used them as a resource for ideas for returning to school, ideas around the feeding program that we're currently undertaking. So I am confident that the leadership team at Chartwells and the folks who provide the services in Council Rock will be able to assist us with providing ideas as well as evaluating any plans that we provide for a return to school.
Would there be any, and we don't know this, but would there be any possibility of increase to that contract, and how would that be handled?
It is very possible. If there is a material change to the terms of the contract, we could be asked to renegotiate. So that is not something that we have discussed at this point yet. But knowing that there is a requirement in the contract for a certain number of operating days, that will certainly change if we do not return to a normal schedule in 2021.
Bill, as always, thank you. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Mr. Salomon. Any other questions? I do not see any. Mr. Salomon, you might want to take your hand down there now. I assume you don't have anything else. Are there any objections? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. All right, motion passed with unanimous consent. With that, we'll move back to Mr. Salomon with the Facilities Committee, please.
Good evening. As part of the joint committee meeting, we discussed our facilities. I apologize. Let me flip the pages here. Where are we at, Andy? Help me out here.
Seven A. Ed, does that help?
Say it again?
7A.
Yeah, that helps.
That doesn't help? Okay, sorry.
So much stuff here to talk about. Here we go. Thank you. Sorry about that. Tonight, we have a couple things to talk about. Obviously, the approval of the KVK agreement and extension, the approval of the custodial bids that Mr. Taylor, I'd like to have him discuss a little bit. And letter D in front of us is the rejection of the Council Rock High School South Synthetic Turf Field project bid. That's a rejection of the bid only. So with that being said, I apologize again. I move to approve the consent agenda item. I apologize. Sorry about this. We're doing this one at a time. Okay. I move to approve the consent agenda item B as contained in the attachment to this agenda. And that's KVK agreement extension.
Second.
Can Doug discuss the custodial agreement first, or should I make the movement first?
Well, we probably want to vote on this first one.
Okay. I move to approve the custodial services agreement 20-15 with ABM Industry Group LLC as
Hey,
attached.
sorry, Mr. Salmon, I've been on mute trying to talk here. Let's pass the consent agenda, right? We had that motion and then go to C. So were there any questions on this consent agenda? Any objections? Everyone in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Okay, thank you. That passed with unanimous consent. All right, Mr. Salomon, now letter C, please. I'm sorry.
And I apologize. I move to approve the custodial services agreement 20-15 with ABM Industry Groups LLC as attached to this agenda, subject to audit and solicitor's review.
Need a second.
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Thorwart. Okay, Doug, you want to give a quick overview here?
Yeah, quickly, the last meeting at the joint meeting, there was a recommendation to consider SSC. And after further discussions with the cabinet team and looking at the information provided by the two firms, ABM and SSC, and Zoom meetings with the respective teams and who was proposed to manage the contracts, it was decided, and this wasn't, I apologize for the waiver between what was discussed at the joint meeting and what was ultimately proposed, but I think it's in our best interest to go with ABM for a couple reasons. One, both companies are highly qualified to manage our district, and one of the issues or concerns was the FTEs, the full-time equivalents, and we have around 68 on a great day currently. What was proposed by SSC was 84 with a reduction to 82 when we started to talk about reducing their contract. And they were very willing to work with us, and they made efforts to do so. And so did ABM. And ABM came back and said, hey, we'll take ours from 75.5 to 78.5 without any increase to the contract. And those three folks will be dedicated to moving around the district and disinfecting and helping during the challenging times we'll have when we return to school at some point. On top of that, ABM proposed specifically a 1990 graduate from Council Rock High School North. He is also moving into Newtown. He will be a resident. He will have children in the school district. He has 20 years experience. He has a strong resume, and he will be our account manager, our day-to-day, who will be stationed at Twining Ford. And that resume came with, was very strong, and the person was very good to talk to, and he's a local guy, and certainly has skin in the game for sure. So, and on top of all of that good stuff, there's about $180,000 savings to go with this firm. And at a time when we're looking at budget cuts and counting every dollar we need to, it was a decision, and I think the right move to go with ABM at this time.
Thanks, Mr. Taylor. Are there any questions for Mr. Taylor?
Yeah, I've got one, Mr. Block.
Yep.
Apple level for this, Doug?
It is Apple level 2, and there is disinfecting daily with the products that are capable of killing the COVID-19 virus, and it within 10 seconds dwell time, it does disinfect the surface. So they will be disinfecting daily with that product for their 3-year agreement. And certainly we're going to have to adjust as we learn more from CDC as we go, but the team is willing to work with us. They're prepared. And I will say that Aramark quickly is very interested in helping us transition. They are here through the end of June. They will work with ABM. And in fact, we have a meeting scheduled for the 26th of May to get together and work on the transition plan. So everybody is on board with this process.
My concern is that we maintain Apple level 2. That's good. Thanks.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Thorwart and Mr. Taylor, for taking the conversation well above my intellect level. Are there any other questions for Mr. Taylor?
I just have a comment, Mr. Block. Mr. Taylor, the motion was subject to solicitor review, but the version that's on the agenda looks like the final version that we negotiated, including the most recent changes, and it meets with my approval. So I wanted to speak to that so the board knows.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Mr. Cox. Are there any objections to this? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes with unanimous consent. And with that, we'll move to letter D relative to the South Synthetic Turf. Mr. Salem, if you can please make the motion.
Sure. I move to reject all bids received for the Council Rock High School South Synthetic Turf Project, bid number 19-53, subject to audit.
Second.
Thank you for the second. I don't think the board needs an update on exactly what this is. I know the vast majority of us aren't happy to be having to take this course of action, but I'll ask, are there any questions for Mr. Taylor? If there are, please, or comments.
Sure. Mr. Taylor, could you just tell us how much over budget it was? Because that's my main concern. That I probably would have voted no because of the came in so above budget anyway.
So I don't have those numbers in front of me, but I know it was a couple $100,000 over budget. When we say over budget, there was added value, but the value came at meetings with the township to add things that were required as a part of their approval. There was additional paving, handicap parking, storm drainage, sidewalks, landscaping. So there was value to that cost, but it was over the budget that was discussed.
Oh,
I believe it was 2.4, the final number. And I think we initially budgeted around $2 million on that.
We also had an allowance for COVID in there, which increased the cost as well for the COVID practice. So that was another unplanned increase to the project.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Are there any other questions or comments? If so, please put your hand up. Are there any objections? All those in favor of this motion, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay.
Aye.
Note the motion passes with unanimous consent. With that, concludes our board motion agenda meeting. Is there any old business from the board? Is there any new business from the board? If so, please raise your hand in the chat box. Okay, don't see any, oh, wait a minute, Dr. Thorwart.
Yeah, just a real quick one. Dr. Frazier, the parade and such that's coming up, can the board help with that or be part of that?
Let me get back to you on that, Dr. Thorwart, if that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, we're still in the planning stages, lots of good and exciting ideas, but at the same time, knowing that we need to stay consistent with the health department, the county health department that has given us blessing to go ahead and do this. So if we can, we will, and if we can, we'll do in the best way possible. But just ask for a little bit of time to continue the planning process, please.
Mr. Tate.
Thank you, Mr. Block. I just repeat the fact that we're having a budget forum next Wednesday evening.
Thank you, Mr. Tate.
And Mr. Block, could I just add, it's June 3rd, so it's not next week, it's the following one right after. But thank you, Mr. Tate, for reminding me.
Premature reminder. Thank you. Thanks for organizing.
Is there any other board comment? Well, with that, I'll thank our 14 attendees who are still with us. I wish everybody here and everybody out there a wonderful Memorial Day weekend, and we will look forward to seeing everybody on June 3rd. Good night.
Good night.